This meeting is cool. All right, you want to turn off the audio? Feedback.
Oh, yeah. Why is their phone always?
Okay.
No.
Yeah, well, things like you, body and phones back.
Oh, wait, oh, yeah. We're probably.
All right, also, I think we're finally ready to go, so. We'll see how things work out. Thanks everyone for showing up. This is a pretty great turnout. My name is Tyler Wynn. I am a third-year electrical engineering major, and I am also a wildland firefighter for the Oregon Department of Forestry. A little bit about me. I worked there last summer on an initial attack crew, an engine crew. So basically, my job was to try to snuff them out when they start small, instead of working on something like a hand crew, which typically travels in groups to around 30, and they work on things called project fires, which are when they get out of control, and it's like a longer term solution, but we'll get more into that. So yeah. Naturally, there we go. All right, disclaimer, this presentation is not in any way associated with the Oregon Department of Forestry. Everything in this presentation is compiled from my own experiences and is no way the official position of the state. By making this presentation, I'm acting as an individual and not as an agent of the state. So there's no association between any of that. I just want to make that very clear. Also, most of the photos in this presentation were taken by me. There are a few exceptions, and you'll probably be able to tell. But yeah, I tried to keep them to my photos just because I could. So yeah. All right, so let's talk about equipment that wildland firefighters use. So it's all about standardization, and basically the whole entire industry uses one manufacturer, which is Bendix King or BK. They've been in the game for a really long time. The oldest and I would say currently most popular model is this radio right here called the DPH. Or if you're on any fire or talk to any firefighter, they're just called bricks. They're a giant metal brick. They're super repairable. They're awesome. They're built really well. And they are VHF. All fire operations, Forest Service operations are on VHF only. So again, it's that standardization. So any radio that you're seeing is going to be VHF. On your guys' right is the BKR 5000s. This is the radio that I was using. It's basically their second newest model for wildland. And they're pretty cool. They have some downsides, like being made of plastic, and they kind of just their build quality went really downhill. But they have things like GPS in them, and they have some really cool features we'll get into in a little bit. And then for things like portable repeaters, they use Codan. So those are the repeaters that we deploy at sites. So why BK? Why do we use them? Why not somebody like Motorola? So there's a few reasons why. One is standardization. When everyone has the same radio, it's a lot easier to work on things, essentially. So when you're on a large project fire where you have people from New Mexico, from Oregon, from Washington, from Florida, Alaska, you really need a way to like keep things standardized, and staying with one brand allows for that. With standardization comes something called cloning, which if you've never worked with BK radios before is something very special that they do. what cloning is essentially it allows you to take one radio and then using a cloning cable, you can attach your radio to another radio and say, I want to select a zone that I'm going to copy. I can select the zone that I want to copy on this radio and send it over to the other radio just on site, no computer software required. And going back to that other slide that I was on, which I can go back to, I can set a zone that I built on the newest radio and send it to the oldest one that they made using cloning cables, and it works great and in any which way direction. So this is a huge advantage that we have. We'll get into a little bit more. The other thing is they are completely front panel programmable. They're fully unlocked. You can program everything in them from the front panel. This is an option that most commercial and emergency-esque radios don't have. So things like Motorola radios are fully locked down usually. You can't program them to the front. You can't change the frequencies. When you're working on these big fires, frequencies get updated pretty fast. And the ability to be able to change those is really key. The other thing is cost. They're significantly cheaper than Motorola, and that's really not saying much. They're still pretty expensive. A BKR 5000 will run you back about $1,700 to $2,000. The bricks are a little cheaper. But yeah, so, and then over here, hey, Motorola APX 6000 in my hand. These aren't used on project fires, but for initial attack in an urban interface, which is where homes and the urban environment meet wildwood environments. So that's where the homes start being spaced maybe like every like 30 acres or so. That's like the wildland urban interface. We will work with structure departments that will be operating on UHF or use Motorola's. So sometimes, depending on the areas that you're in, you may have to carry a Motorola radio to communicate with other people. But you'll never see these on project fires. No, okay, I guess next slide, please. Nice.
I think we're frozen. No.
Hang on.
Oh, the clock is not.
What the fuck?
Got jealous of the no Motorola policy.
I don't know what to do. It's just stuck. Oh, the clock's back.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Still.
Yeah. Closer to escape is always the answer. You can get more instructive.
No, watch.
You say it the faster that it'll get.
Say it louder. Say it louder and slower. Exactly, okay? Louder and slower. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, well, phone was like, when I wasn't able to meet, I did all our data, everything.
Skyline's pretty. The skyline's pretty, it's very pink.
Oh.
Yeah, because I mean,
Pink.
okay, we're back, cool. Also, I want to keep this pretty open, so if anyone has any questions at any point throughout the presentation, please ask them. What's up, Sharon?
What is a zone?
What is a zone? Yeah, what is a zone? Okay, that's a great question. So, radios have different ways of grouping channels. So the way that we group sets of channels are in things called zones. So, for instance, in my radio, I have a zone called San Luis Obispo, and in there, I put all of the frequencies that pertain to this area. And in the case of fires, we'll make a zone for all the frequencies that are used on that project fire. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions currently? Cool. One thing that I was trying to show off in this photo is how big these things are. That's a Baofeng radio, and that's the BKRs. They're huge. They're really big and heavy. And then behind that is a what's the thing that the Motorola service monitor? Behind it is a service monitor, which I was using to compare the BKR to the Baofeng. So yeah,
Do you know the weight difference between them?
I don't, but I could figure it out.
Yeah.
There's such a big difference. So the rest of the presentation is gonna be very timeline based. So we're gonna start with the fire starts. Now what happens? So typically when a fire starts, it's spotted by a camera in a lookout tower or on a radio site, or it's spotted by a lookout tower that's manned. There are actually some manned lookout towers. Actually, it was on a fire that was spotted by one. And once these fires are spotted, if they're spotted through a camera, the dispatchers have like software that they can look at all the cameras, and they can actually like place a pin on the view, and then it will like mark it on a map. And then they'll dispatch resources depending on where it's located in the access. If there's no Forest Service roads or roads available, they'll send smoke jumpers in, or heli-tac crews. So smoke jumpers are wildland firefighters that go in an airplane, they have a parachute, and they dump them out, and then they deploy their parachute and they land in the forest. And then they dump all of their gear out of the plane as well. Heli-tac is a little different. They actually land the helicopter and everyone gets out onto the ground, and then the helicopter helps them with operations. And then there's repellers, which they hover the helicopter, then they rappel down. If there is road access, they will send initial attack engine crews to it, which is what I was on. So you'll see a small Type 6 engine, which the engines are split up in different types, depending on how much water they carry. Type 6 is about the smallest that they have, so about 300 gallons of water. They'll send a Type 6 engine onto the fire up there. Usually it takes a few hours to locate. I was on a fire, we were wandering around for 3 hours trying to find it, and then eventually we called in a helicopter to help us locate it. Usually these resources will work together. So if it's really far out in the middle of nowhere, they're gonna send smoke jumpers, but at the same time, they're also gonna be dispatching ground resources, because there's only so much that you can do as like 10 people. Now, if we did our job right and we were able to catch it, then we wouldn't move on to the next stage. But let's say that it was brewing for a little too long and the fire weather was not great, and it catches and it gets big, and that's when we call in the village. That's when it becomes a project fire. So beforehand, we were just limited to on-district resources. There are fire districts that are basically that section out states. So each unit is like assigned to a certain amount of space that they patrol. And if the fires are small enough, they stay within district on district resources. But if they get big and turn into project fires, then it becomes an out of district fire. And the home district backs off, and then a team takes over. So what does that look like? So yeah, a team is dispatched, and what a team is essentially all of the like administration components of the fire. So things like accountants, logistics people, radio people, they all have year-round jobs and they're all assigned to teams. So there are a few teams that make up the Oregon Department of Forestry, and when there's a big fire on land, one of those teams is dispatched out there and they'll start driving to the location. They'll start procuring a place to put the fire camp at, procuring a place to put ICP, which stands for the Incident Command Post, which is where all of their operations happens at. And they'll just begin those first steps for establishment. So let me see. During that time, they're also going to begin ordering resources. So they're going to be calling in resources from around the country and from the state and sending out these orders. Units will get the orders and they'll say, yeah, we can send an engine out to you, or yeah, we can send a hand crew out to you, or no. Oregon also contracts a lot of stuff out. So you'll also have a lot of contractors that will send hand crews or engine crews out. We're a little unique that we use so many contractors. CAL FIRE does not work with contractors really, or I should say contractors don't work for CAL FIRE because they suck to work for. They don't pay people very well, or they just don't pay you at all. So yeah, so what does comms look like in this kind of yeah, what's up?
On that slide, for like, let's say when it's on fire, what's typically the response time, like when you get a helicopter?
Smoke jumpers can be on, depending on the location, they can be on fire within like 45 minutes to an hour, even if they're really fast. It's kind of crazy. If you're looking on like an engine crew, if it's like in the middle of nowhere, it could take like 4 hours to get to it. So
your response times vary by time of day.
a little bit, yeah, but generally people live pretty close to the district offices. So usually what will happen is, let's say like it happens after hours, because my job was hourly. You show up at like 8 or 9 o'clock, you drive around in patrol, and then I leave at like 6:30. And let's say something is spotted. There is one of our supervisors is assigned the role of going out and scouting fire. So typically if it gets called in at night, that person is on call and they go and check it out and see if it requires a crew. Once they determine that it requires a crew, then they start making phone calls to the firefighters. So they'll start calling you at night. It's like, hey, do you want to go to this? You can always decline. And then you drive, get there. So the response time is definitely delayed, but like only by like an hour or two. And I can assure, being duty officer sucks. It's that's the role that I was talking about that has to go and check those out. Our duty officer 1 week worked 120 hours, I think. And not one of those fires was actually a big deal. It was just a bunch of press alarms. So it's a lot of driving out in the middle of the night to see nothing.
Yeah.
But when it pops off, it's worth it. So yeah. Any other questions so far? Cool. Yeah. So anyways, getting back to fire camp establishments. So what do comms look like during this like weird intermediary time when we're getting set up? So as resources are coming in, they're going to be operating on local repeaters. So each district has local repeaters that are permanent, and they have COMTs, which stand for comm technicians, that manage those repeaters. So during this intermediary point of time, all operations are through those repeaters, and they're going through the local dispatch centers as well that are on district. Also during this time, the comms trailer is being set up, and they're going to start looking at places to put repeaters. So like I said, the comm L, which is the comm lead, that's the position that manages all of the communications. He or she has the comm trailer, and they bring it up with them, and they're going to begin setting it up. And then they're gonna look into repeater locations with their COMT to see like, okay, where's our fire on the map? What does our topography look like? Where can we get a repeater in here? And they're gonna just start planning that out essentially. So let's talk a little bit about repeater installation. So this is a photo of a mobile repeater on a fire that I was on. This is a NIFC kit. NIFC is a huge fire organization that's national. I can't remember the exact abbreviation. I don't know if I put it on there.
National Incident Fire Command.
That sounds about right. We'll go with that. And they have a huge cache of stuff. So a cache is just like a giant warehouse full of things that you need. And the state also has a fire cache, but Oregon was super busy over the summer, so we ran out of stuff. So you call NIFC for things. So these are NIFC repeaters. They have a huge cache where they store all of these. Over here, they come with everything you need to set them up. They come on a giant pallet with a bunch of them and mass. But right here is the main repeater equipment. And then there are some breakouts over here. And the antennas are also stored in the box as well. So over here is a little Yagi-Uda antenna. And there's also VHF and UHF antennas, and then instructions and all the things that you could ever want inside of them. They're pretty sweet. They're heavy and cumbersome though, which is a little sucky. So you don't want to with them.
What's the Yagi for repeater to repeater repeat?
I talked about that as we get through. Yes, because I also said UHF. Originally, I said we only do VHF. So there are some things, but yeah. And then if you're curious how they get there, there are people called runners. It's kind of weird because I was asked to get some of the equipment, and it's just like a guy with a Prius with like $10,000 of radio equipment in the back of his car, and it's just people like that do odd jobs for hire, and they run them over to the fires. So they can ship these out within 24 hours, and they'll be to your location. So how do we get the repeaters to the sites once they've chosen them? There are a few options. Either you can drive up to there, which is what we were able to do because we had really good road access. So usually what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to drive up, set up your repeater on a hilltop, and then drive out. Sometimes that can involve a short hike. And with two people, it's like pretty doable. One person would be kind of brutal. But I have heard stories from my COM-L of using helicopters to get to the repeater sites, because sometimes you need to get onto a mountain and there's no roads up there. And usually you'll go to the command post and you'll be like, I could hike this, but I'm going to be gone for 6 hours. And they're like, no, screw you, you're getting on a helicopter, they're going to drop you off. So yeah, they do helicopter drop-offs and pickups, which is pretty cool and fun. I did not get to ride in a helicopter, unfortunately. That would have been awesome though. So let's talk a little bit about the repeaters themselves. Every fire is different. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about the general topography of how this stuff works. And I'm kind of wishing that I put my last slide first. But I guess I have a whiteboard. So yeah. So there are multiple repeaters usually, not just one, because the topography is weird and it requires multiple. But generally, you're going to have a central repeater or central repeaters. And those repeaters are going to be placed pretty close to the comm trailer and within line of sight of all of the node repeaters. So over here is our central repeater. And I'm just gonna kind of run down like what you're looking at exactly. So here's the main repeater box that I was talking about. That's what you saw earlier. So all of the actual stuff that's doing radio things is in that box. You may be wondering, how do these things get power? You just leave them out in the middle of nowhere for a while. Well, right over here is a solar panel that you can roll up. It's like, feels like fabric. So they are solar powered. And then that solar panel goes along with this Pelican case. And then here is a bunch of batteries. There are also batteries inside this. So there's two sets of batteries. So
we're running power off of the solar panel, power's going into this battery box, and then it's also going into here. And then this is just a bunch of like random equipment. And then as you see, there are two poles, and these are not, one of these is not transmit, and one of these is not receive. They are two different bands, actually. So one of them is a VHF antenna, and the other one is a UHF antenna. So the VHF antenna is used for communicating with your ground personnel on their radios, because we only use VHF. And the UHF antenna, as Akshay thought, is used for linking to other repeaters. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about how they're linked in the other slides after I show you how these things are built. But yeah, so you're gonna find a nice high spot in topography, and you're gonna set these two bad boys up, and this is your central repeater. So no Yagi on this one. And here is a node repeater on the fire that I was on. So here again, you can see there's the solar panel, behind there is the battery box, and then here's the repeater. You have your main VHF antenna, and up here is the antenna for that. And then they have these little guys that shoot out as your ground plane. And then right here is the Yagi antenna that I was talking about. So this is aimed roughly at the central repeater. And essentially how this works is you're going to talk on your handheld. It's going to be picked up by this antenna, and it's going to be broadcasted back to the central repeater, and the central repeater is going to rebroadcast that out on its antenna. And here is kind of the layout of how this works. So you have your comms trailer, which has just radio equipment. There's no repeater on the comms trailer. And actually in this photo, our repeater is right on this hilltop. So it's pretty sweet, right next to 5G cell tower, which is also pretty sweet for cell service. You don't always get cell service, so it's nice. So then if I want to talk to somebody on the ground, let's say really far away in a canyon, what would happen is I would transmit on here, the central node would pick that up, and then it would rebroadcast on its VHF antenna and on its UHF antenna. All the other repeaters would pick it up on their antennas through UHF and then rebroadcast it out as VHF. And then this photo of me down here would hear it on the ground. And if I want to talk back to the comms trailer, I would transmit. This would pick me up, broadcast to the central node. The central node would rebroadcast it out to the comms trailer. Now, one thing that is a little confusing is this repeater, as far as I'm aware, cannot talk to the other repeaters. So it's kind of like the comms trailer can, if you're talking on the central node, you can talk to all of the other nodes, but the nodes can't talk to each other. Usually that's fine because your communications are very like location dependent, and because it's a controlled environment and you have to pass all traffic through the comms trailer, you can get away with it. So yeah.
A question,
What's up?
are the nodes versus central nodes on different frequencies?
Yes, they are on different frequencies. Yes. Yeah, it makes it confusing when you don't name them well and then nobody knows what to talk on. Yeah. We had a lot of problems with that. What's up?
For a big project fire, is there usually only one system like this for operation in Canada? There are other systems for
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, we can talk about frequency allocation actually, because that's interesting stuff. I think I also have a slide on that. Let's see. Oh no, I don't. Okay, we'll talk about frequency allocation real quick. Yeah, so you can go back. Sweet. So how it works is when you have a big project fire, you're going to request a bunch of frequencies. They're going to send you TAC channels, which are simplex, so radio to radio. For general initial attack operations or non-project fire operations, it's really weird. There are 3 universal simplex channels for the whole entire country that everyone uses. It's called RedNet, WhiteNet, and BlueNet. RedNet and BlueNet.
Very American.
You don't say.
RedNet and BlueNet are for ground-to-ground communication, just like operations type stuff. WhiteNet is reserved for ground-to-air, air-to-ground communications with helicopters and such. So if, for instance, if you're on an initial attack in district fire and you want to talk to the helicopter that you're trying to get bucket drops with, you just use WhiteNet. You don't have to talk about frequencies. But for these large project fires, they're going to allocate probably like 8 TAC channels, and depending on like what you're doing on the fire, you're going to be assigned to those TAC channels. And for instance, if I want to talk to Joe over here across the line about something that's going on, I talk to him on that. Or if I want to talk to my like squad leader, I talk to him, and then he relays whatever message I have over the repeater system to communications. And then there are air to ground frequencies that are also allocated, but they aren't on repeaters usually. Just because you usually have line of sight, so it's not necessarily what's up.
And the computers that were broken down are not working.
Yeah, they break. Yeah, they do break, and that's a thing. If so what happens is like if people aren't responsive, if they don't respond to your messages, at first the thought is, oh, they're not listening, but after 8 times of trying to get in contact with them and they haven't responded, now it's a question of, do you go drive up and check that out and make sure that it's working? So yeah. And that's the ComT's job, is to maintain all of that stuff. Any other questions?
Are the BK radios dual receive? Can it listen to 2 different channels at once?
I think the way that they would do that is, okay, yeah, like scanning is what you're talking about, right? Or kind of,
Yeah,
like,
so you have-
like how you have like 2 channels set up?
Yeah, you have dual watch and dual receive. So dual watch is that you can put 2 in, and then whichever one's talking, it'll listen to that one. Dual receive is it can actually listen to both at the same time and play them back.
I don't know, to be honest. I do know that scanning on our BK radios is pretty different than how you're used to seeing scanning on more consumer radios. So you'll set up like a scan list, and that's the list that it will scan, and it goes through that really fast, a bunch. And then you can set up priority channels. So like I can say, like, I think Motorola's do this as well, but you can set up priority channels. So like I can say, I want this channel to always be on if it's heard, even if other things are talking. And then you can also have like nuisance delete. So like, let's say Bob over here has been talking way too much. I can press a button and delete him temporarily from the scan list, essentially. So you don't have to listen to him. So yeah, I'm not sure though. That'd be an interesting thing to look into though.
Yeah. Well, because I was just wondering, with so many different channels, which one are you normally listening to? Is it your repeater frequency or your simplex, your TAC channel?
It really depends on what your role in the fire is. If you are if you're just like a firefighter on the ground, typically you're just gonna be on your TAC channels, your simplex TAC channels. Any type of leadership, any type of like a squaddy or a squad boss would be listening to their TAC channels and also the central system. So yeah, everything in fire uses the chain of command. It's all chain of command stuff. So you have to work up the chain, just like the military. Yes, Ryan.
I was gonna say, the BK radios are Motorola is big. I would like on dual watch. I would watch like you can put as many channels.
Okay.
And it'll watch.
Yeah, exactly.
They have the top, all on top, just like this channel you're on. Which channel you want them and select scanning.
Yep. Yeah, you can build scan lists and everything. So like whenever I'd be on a fire, I would build a whole new scan list, delete everything that I didn't need to listen to, and just put in stuff that I need to listen to. So yeah. So let's talk about spreading the code plug. Because this is a messy thing. To the photo of this is a cloning cable. This is called the octopus, is what we like to call it. It gets even more messy than this because there's other attachments that you can put onto this. This is the horrid thing that somehow allows you to connect something made in 2020 to something made in like 1990, and it works just fine. I don't know how on earth they've gotten this to work. It never breaks. You can pull it out in the middle of transferring and it won't break your radio. They've done some real magic on this. You can plug in a handheld into a mobile and drop your code plug onto the mobile and it just works. It's insane. So this thing is pretty crazy. And yeah, so essentially what's going to happen is, you know, your COM L and your COM T, they've positioned their repeaters, they've got their frequencies assigned to them, and they're going to start building this code plug and a COM plan essentially that's going to go on a piece of paper that's handed out daily at morning briefing, which a bunch of others, with a bunch of other stuff like weather information, fire activity, all that stuff. Yes. Yep. Yes, it's exactly like that. Yeah. So they're gonna make that COM plan. It's gonna be approved and everything. Usually you have a few people look it over for mistakes. And then you're gonna go in your BK software and you're gonna put in all the frequencies and you're gonna put it on your radio. And then the COM-L is gonna give it to me, and then he's gonna clone it to my radio. And then everyone that comes to the COM trailer after we've activated that code plug, they're gonna be like, hey, I need a clone. And I'm gonna be like, okay, cool. Hook up my radio to their radio, clone, clone, clone. And then at morning briefing, because there's a briefing every morning that everyone goes to. The COM T and the COM L go to that. The radios don't, and I'll explain what a radio is in a little bit. They're gonna have their cloning cables, and there's gonna be a line, and they're just gonna be cloning a bunch. And what would be awesome is if everyone had the cloning cables, so then it could spread like a virus, where like you just give it to one person and they give it to two people, and then just like keeps going. So what happens if you make a mistake? Because those happen. People get really freaking grumpy. The last thing you want to hear on a fire is, yeah, we have an update to the thing. Because you know you'll have somebody check your code plug like 3 times and you could still miss something. Well, you know, you have personnel on the ground that need to be able to talk, so get ready to hike, because you're going out to the line and you're going to be on the line actually cloning everyone's radios in the field, and it's a jolly good old time. So yeah.
Do you think there would ever be a way that you could just have like a splitter? That you could have one and then like 5 others, like you would have a squad leader and then that squad leader goes to the comm and like takes the first one and then just like, hey,
That's
voila.
I think we need to pitch that to BK. Make the Octopus 3.0. Yeah. No, I mean, I think a lot of, I know that Motorola does stuff like that, but it might be hard to implement. But yeah, somehow this works. Somehow it doesn't break the radios. It's kind of magical, and I think it's one of the coolest things about BK radios, to be honest. I've never heard of this before until then. All right. So everyone has your frequencies. Everyone's talking. What do you do once you're established? This is a photo from inside the comms trailer. So I, on this project fire, was a radio. And what that is a radio operator. So they aren't a technician, they aren't a lead. Essentially, they're a dispatcher without the ability to make any actual decisions, which kind of sucks, to be honest. I did not enjoy it, but I learned a lot of stuff. So once your fire camp is established and everyone has your stuff, all comms are passed through the comms trailer and through the radios. So it's essentially acting like dispatch. So any operations that were happening on the dispatch channels are now going through the comms trailer. So let's say Joe Schmo over here has a line order. He wants 400 feet of hose and a Mark III pump. He can tell his squad boss, and then they can contact communications, and then I will take down a line order on paper. And then I will give that to logistics, and then the logistics will fulfill the line order. And then I will say, okay, cool, they're gonna be there in about 45 minutes. And then they'll say, sweet, we'll send somebody to pick it up, or they just won't respond to you, and that happens, and that's really annoying. Yeah, and all communications are recorded on paper logs. So everything that everyone says is written down by hand. They don't do audio recording, although in district, all repeater communications are audio recorded, but for some reason here they don't. Yeah, so the comms trailer kind of acts as like a central location for everyone to just talk to. So basically, if you want to talk to operations in ICP and you're on the line, you go through comms, and it just allows everything to be very centrally controlled.
Question,
What's up?
do you see any advantage of using paper over some software program?
I think people in the wildland industry really don't like technology, and a lot of them are a little technically troubled. So I think trying to keep things as simple as possible are nice. Not to mention, when you're filling line orders, we do everything on carbon copy paper, which is like really cool, because I've never used that before until doing this job. And it's kind of fun because you get to like write, and then you get to tear off the other sheets and hand them to people. But yeah, I mean, personally, I think I'd have a harder time typing stuff than I would handwriting it. But that's just me.
What if you mess up? Like you don't hear it, you have to ask them to repeat it, or you just call it a day and be like, eh,
You
oh
can,
well.
it's, I mean, it depends on how important it is. You can definitely ask to repeat their information though. And the funny thing is after you do this for like 3 days, you can anticipate what people are gonna say. Like you know everyone's voices, you know all of the like all of the divisions, and you kind of like build this like weird like relationship where you never see these people, but you hear them and you talk to them every day. So I don't know, I think it's kind of fun. Yes.
Wait, so does all communication go through the radios, or is it just specifically the line order requests?
All communications. So yeah, that's a good question. So not all communications goes through the radios, but if you want to talk to, if you want to talk to anyone at the incident command post or anyone at the fire camp, that goes to the radios. If, for instance, you have like 2 squad bosses that are trying to talk to each other over the repeater, they don't have to talk through the radios. But I will still record what they're saying when they say that. So you don't have to pass all traffic through them. But if you want to make any type of line order, or if you want to get any resources, that goes through them. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, right.
How many radios?
2 per comms trailer usually. Yeah, you're usually on the same frequency listening. On my fire, there was only 1 radio, it was me. And it kind of sucks when you have to go to the bathroom, because you have to take your handheld, and then there's a bunch of like paperwork that you have to have like with you in case there's an emergency. So you just like take all that to the porta potty with you, and it kind of sucks. But yeah, usually there are 2 if you can get them ordered, but not a lot of people want to do the job because it kind of sucks. So yeah. Any other questions? Cool. So one of the most important jobs, I say the most important job of, that a radio has to fulfill is IWIs, which stands for incident within an incident. So the whole entire fire is an incident, right? But there's a lot of stuff going on, so there are gonna be a lot of other incidents going on, like, I don't know, let's say, I'm trying to think of other creative names. Let's say James Smith over here, fell a tree onto Jolie's head and, or no, onto Jolie's legs, and now she's trapped. That's an incident within an incident. Or let's say, I wasn't really paying attention while walking around and I ended up rolling down 100% grade, like, so, or maybe, I don't know, I got a pretty nasty bruise or twisted my ankle. These are all incidents, and they all have levels. So there is green, yellow, red, and black with an asterisk mark on it, because you never say black over the radio. It doesn't really exist. Black is if somebody is just dead. But you don't say that because it really screws with people's morale when you announce over the radio that somebody's died. So it's just a red. It's always a red priority. So green would be like twisted my ankle, but I can still walk. Yellow would be like some sort of actual like trauma to the skin. Let's say you got burned. Let's say like your arm was broken or something. If your leg is broken, that's kind of getting towards red territory. But yeah, they have different levels. This happens a lot, and it's really important to have communications there, because if you're not there, then nobody has an ability to talk to any resources. Essentially, you're just kind of like on the fire talking to the void. So what happens when an IWI happens? There's something called an 8-line that everyone in fire is trained to fill out. It was actually created after one of my colleagues' cousins died because I think, oh, what happened? I think somebody was felling a tree, it fell on his legs. He didn't have to die, but because this procedure didn't exist, the people on the ground did not realize how big of a deal it was, and they did not get to him fast enough. So it was like a very unnecessary death. So they developed this. There's a whole entire small little pocketbook called the IRPG, which is essentially a culmination of all the information that has been learned from people's deaths, and that essentially like a whole playbook on like what to do, because we know that somebody did something else and it didn't go very well. But what's gonna happen is like let's say a tree fell on somebody's legs. There's going to be a person on the ground that's going to identify themselves as the IC, the incident commander. And they're going to open up their IRPG to the back page, and they're going to pull out this 8-line, and they're going to start filling out all this information about like their location, patient status, resources that they need. They're going to announce that there's an emergency. The radio is going to pick that up, and then they're going to clear all communications. And one thing that's kind of crazy about this is if it's a yellow or a red, everything stops on fire. Every single operation stops. So if you're digging line, if you're operating an excavator, if you're felling trees, if you're doing anything, all fire operations stop and they listen to what's going on. And essentially, the IC of the IWI is going to read this 8-line. As the radio, you have an identical card that's like we have like a giant one that you can like write on with one of these. And you're going to copy all that information down. And usually what's going to happen is the safety officer and the IC of the fire is going to start like making their way over. And you're just going to listen, and you're going to relay everything that the IC of the IWI needs to anyone on the ground and get them all the resources that they need to fulfill this. And this is the reason why we have somebody at the comms trailer staffed usually 24/7. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal. Let me see if I think I covered everything. Yeah, I did. Any questions about IWIs? Yeah.
What do you guys do to usually keep your morale up?
Well, if you're on a hand crew, a lot of drugs. I think, no, I mean, so that they're on hand crews, there are, there are meth problems sometimes, but that's, I don't know, I've never experienced that. I don't know, I mean, I think a lot of people do it because they love it and the work is hard and you're getting generally paid really well, because you're working 16-hour shifts. And you're doing that for 14 days straight with no breaks. So you make a lot of overtime. Yeah, I'd say pay, caffeine, and in copious amounts of calories. Also, the people that you're around are usually pretty awesome. So yeah. I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah. What's up?
So for this, who decides the priority level, and what happens if the IC like isn't there to see the incidents? How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, well, the priority level is decided by whoever is on the scene with the person. They can decide whatever it is, and they can also choose to change it whenever they want to as well. Generally, it's a good idea to start out higher and get those things moving. But yeah, if they aren't there to see it, they're still going to render aid and everything, but yeah, I mean, if you're alone and something really bad happens to you and you can't use your radio, like people should be checking in and keeping track of others. So like, for instance, when you're on a fire and let's say like on this one fire that I was on, I was in one location and I was being sent up to a different location. The person that was sending me up is saying, I'm sending Wynn up. And then they're like, I copy. And then I got up and they were like, Wynn has arrived, copy. So it's like you're keeping track of where people are. And we actually had a training exercise where somebody was supposed to like lie down and kind of like play injured, and they didn't respond over the radio, and they wanted to see how long it took for us to realize that they hadn't responded. So yeah, people should be keeping track of people, and the IC decides the priority.
Yeah, I'm curious, how long did it take you guys to find out?
It's a good sign.
Too long. Everyone was being really bad at responding to their radios, so I was kind of just annoyed and thought that people weren't listening to their radio. Probably like 12 minutes. Yeah, not great. But yeah, usually you will never be doing anything alone. Like you don't do things alone unless you're moving between places. You can do that alone, but that's when they're gonna keep track of where you are. So yeah, buddy system. Yes.
Can you get an IWI? What if there's an incident and then there's an incident, but then someone else has an incident?
Well, that's a clusterfuck, but yeah, that would definitely happen. Yeah, well, why not?
Okay. And
Yeah,
then-
who knows? I mean, like maybe you need air resources, and the air resources come and they get into a crash. Then you're like, not a good time. Yeah, and there are they also have EMTs posted at every division as well, and there's also medics that are scattered around, and it's also like your job as the radio to keep track of all your resources. So we have like a giant map and a lot of like little stickers, and I'll start like putting them up everywhere on where everyone is. And sometimes the medics are really bad about telling you where they are, and it really annoys me because I need to know where they are if somebody is dying. So yeah, but generally everyone's really good about listening to their radios when something really bad happens. So yeah, it's definitely, people take it really seriously. Yeah. Yes.
Can you follow up, a gate line, do you say any words over the air to like clear channels my people talking?
Yeah. So the incident commander of the IWI is going to say that they have an emergency, and then the radio is going to announce that over any other channels that that needs to happen on. And say like clear for emergency traffic, and then everyone's gonna shut up. So, yes. Cause I don't know, like we were talking about with the repeaters, maybe, you know, you're talking in one division and that division is. Like, I can hear the division, but not all the other divisions can hear them, so then I would need to go and re-announce that essentially. So, yeah. Anything else? Cool, let's see what we have. No, alright, well, something a little more lighthearted, maintenance and day-to-day operations, so. Like we were talking about, repeaters do break. Generally, the COM-T will go up and check each repeater every single day, if possible. If your repeater is on a site that is only accessible via helicopter, you're probably not gonna be checking that, because helicopters are expensive. But if you can drive to them, they will usually check them and make any repairs if necessary. The COM-Ts travel with a lot of equipment, like as you saw, they carry like field, I'm blanking on the name of the machine again.
Service monitor.
Service monitor, thank you. They carry field service monitors, they carry all sorts of very fun things and tons of spare parts, like just, I don't know, like a box this big full of broken BK radios that you can just get spare parts from if you really need it. Cause people break them, things happen. We had this one guy that that brought his radio in, it fell in a porta tank, which is basically not a porta potty, it's a portable tank. Basically it's a giant tank that you can like unfold and you can load a bunch of water into it from a tender and then put like a pump platform next to it and pump off of that. And my guess was he was like leaning over it and his radio was in his radio harness and it just went and fell in. They're supposed to be waterproof, but BK.
Just like your Motorola.
BK, yeah, just like. I think what we learned in this club is things that say they aren't things that say that they're waterproof aren't waterproof. So Demo, my nickname for some reason, because my COM-L was a menace to society. Such a weird man. So what is Demo? Demo stands for demobilization. So yeah, once your fire is pretty inactive, that means like no active flaming front at all, no flames, or very, very, very minimal flames, and everything is mopped up 1 to 200 feet in from the perimeter is the standard for out of district fires. You may be asking, what's mop up? Oh, it's a very fun time, I'll tell you that. Lots of great smells actually. So mop up is the act of cooling down the area that's been burned. So a lot of people think that fire is flames. It is so much more than that. You can put out flames and the fire is still active. So mop up is to actually kill the fire. And basically what the whole deal is there's a few different strategies for mopping up. You can do dry mop up, which absolutely sucks. It feels like you're playing in the dirt. Basically what you're doing is you're using your hand tool and you're just mixing the dirt. You're trying to bring everything that's down and under and like really hot still. So like, let's say you have like a bed of ash that's like still burning deep underground and it's smoldering. You want to rip all of that up above the surface and mix it with cold soil and then wait a day for the night to hit and the RH, the relative humidity, to go up and then cool down the area. And I don't like dry mop up, it's terrible. And then what's up?
What's your depth on that?
Huh? Until you don't see anything that's hot or feel anything that's hot. So what you'll do to check is this is like the only time that you don't have gloves on, is you'll like so basically what I'll be doing is I'll be digging and mixing stuff up, and then once I think that an area is clean, I'll take off one of my gloves and I'll start shoving my hands in the dirt and things and feeling for heat. Also, what you'll do is you need to back off and usually like wait a few hours and then come back at the heat of the day, and you'll see smoke come, like little like wispies come out of the soil. And that gets into wet mop up, which is the way to do it. It's so nice. That's basically where you're just going to you're going to use water essentially. Structure firefighters will have you believing that the solution to stopping fire is just dump 2,500 gallons of water on the problem and call it a day. That doesn't work in wildland situations. You do something called cold capping, which is basically where you make a really wet, cold layer, but the fire is still burning underneath. So the goal with mop up and wildland is, one, we don't have like 3,000 gallon tankers just sitting around constantly. Water's pretty like, it's a commodity. It's hard to get out there. It's like really complex to get out there actually. So what you're doing is you'll have one guy on a hose, usually what we call poi hose, which is just like your garden hose, essentially, but cotton jacket. And you're going to be misting over the surface, and as you're misting, you're mixing it. So the goal is not to make it wet, just to cool it down, because you don't want to puddle. You don't want to cold cap anything. And you're just going to do that for really big, heavy fuels. We call them 1,000-hour fuels, like let's say like a log or something. And let's say that's really hot. How do you cool that down and make sure that it's not burning inside? You're going to take your hand tool and you're going to literally scrape everything off that's burned. And you're just going to keep scraping and then wetting it and scraping and wetting it. It's a process. This is why you need thousands of people on hand crews that are just doing this constantly. But yeah, that's mop up. It's a great time. Once you've mopped up the perimeter 1 to 200 feet, the fire is now considered contained. So if you're looking on like fire information on like something that's by your house, there are different words, so a lot of people don't understand what they mean. Lined means that you put the fire line around it. So either you dug with hand tools and removed the fuels, or you've used a dozer to actually just basically dig line around it and remove the fuels. Or you've done wet line or retardant line, which is where you use, like tankers to create a line of retardant. That's lining it. That means the fire hasn't got to there yet. The whole entire goal is to stop it. Containment is the area that's been mopped up and is totally cold and has no chance of relighting. So once that's finished, you're going to start the demo process. And typically what that looks like is resources are going to slowly start being demobilized. So around the day before everyone leaves, you're going to start hearing engines saying that they're leaving for demo, and you're going to get a list. And basically the whole goal of the radio is they're going to radio to you saying we're demobbing, and you're going to check them off the list and make sure that everyone gets out when they need to get out. And engine crews are going to start leaving, hand crews are going to start leaving. Typically what happens is almost everyone will be gone by the end of the day once it's been initialized. The next day we'll start taking down repeaters. So there we go, deconstruction. So we're gonna start taking down repeaters once people begin to leave, once we think it's safe to. So this is me up taking down one of our repeaters, very conveniently a giant storm cell right above us, making things a little dicey. I didn't have it as bad as the guy on the other hilltop, which he literally was hearing all of the antennas around him hissing at him because of the charge difference. So try not to take them down when a storm cell is up. But yeah, so basically we're gonna take it all down, we're gonna pack it up. While that's happening, all comms are gonna be moved from being controlled by the incident command post to back onto local repeaters. So that means anyone that's still on the fire, because sometimes some resources stay a little later and work with the local department. We're gonna have to give them a new code plug with all of the local repeater frequencies, essentially. And everything's gonna be transmitted there. There's gonna be an announcement over the repeater system saying that we're shutting it down and to transfer everything over. And then basically you just pack these bad boys up, you take inventory, you stick them on a pallet. And I don't know, somebody picks them up at some point, I think. And then you pack up the comms trailer and all the resources return home. And if you're with the incident command post, sometimes you get to have a little bit of fun afterwards. Just realize this is recorded, so. Yeah. The national caterer leaves, which is always an unfortunate thing to see them go. So they usually will pack you a few lunches and then go away. Yeah, well, thanks for listening to me blabber for that long. I really appreciate it. I hope this was informative and interesting. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask. If you're interested in a career with the Oregon Department of Forestry, as a CommT, because I think that's a really fun job, and I think a lot of people in here would probably enjoy it. Or as a FFT2, which stands for Firefighter Type 2, that's what I was. You can apply at Oregon Job Opportunities Workday account. Yeah, I just thought I'd put that in there. This is a photo of me after some hazing when they tied a thing of flagging across and then stuffed a bunch of flowers in the flagging, which you can't see on this photo, but that happened afterwards. So that's really cute. So yeah, any questions? Anything at all? Yeah.
Regarding like wet mop-up, right?
Yeah.
Would you think that like you could have like some sort of like syringe that you can put in like, let's say like a foot or 2 feet in the ground, like when like the efficient, or like do like some sort of spread that you can have like thin layer like deep down. Would that ever be used?
Soil becomes hydrophobic, which is weird one. So mixing is like required really, because like this actually the way that I know this is I lost a bonsai tree to hydrophobic soil. If it's really dry and you try to wet it, it just like will just like pool the water. It won't spread through. You have to like turn it into small particles and then wet it as you're doing that. So yeah, I just don't think that's very efficient. And then also, you know, you really run the risk of like an ember that's hot being in there and rekindling it. Because it's kind of crazy how much just a small ember can do. I mean, these things skunk around. These things been skunk around for months. Like a lot of fires. I think people don't like realize how long these things hide for. Like after a lightning strike, that can hide for weeks. Like the tree is smoldering, but it doesn't have enough like energy to catch yet. We also had an instance where somebody had a burn pile that they lit off like 2 months ago, and then they covered it up with a bunch of dirt and mixed it up, and it recaught 2 months later and just like blew up. So like it's weird. It's like a lot more detailed work than you would initially think. So yeah, to answer your question, I think it leaves too many unknowns, you know. You got to see it and feel it to make sure that's actually cold. Anything else? Yeah.
So I'm assuming that same thing about the fires hiding is like why you can't put like chemicals on top, maybe like an endothermic reaction, just to kind of like soak up a bunch of the heat and kind of the heat capacity from the fire.
That's an interesting idea. I think the reason why they wouldn't use that is that's like probably is insanely expensive. Like retardant is like really expensive. It's like I need to look up how much like a tanker of that costs. So yeah, I think fire departments are not very well funded. I think my district's budget was like $2 million or something, which is wild considering that we manage like probably over 300 square miles, like 300 by 300 like miles of forest. And they only gave us like not a lot of money. So yeah, I think it's a cost thing probably. Yes.
Do you ever, do you like, wouldn't be playing shop, do you ever talk to like the, the retarded, like the ground crews?
Yeah, so yes. Air operations is always in communication with grounds, with ground crews. So when you're doing a helicopter drop, you're gonna usually, people are gonna be really close by. Usually I've been like right under helicopter drops. It's pretty cool. It's pretty awesome getting on-demand rain. So what you're gonna have is you're gonna have somebody that's like certified to talk with the helicopter. They have signaling devices, so like mirrors, lights. You can also out of flagging, which is like that like tape stuff that you just wrap around things. You can make like different signaling devices. You can like make a grid of flagging or flash the mirror, and then you're gonna be talking to them over the radio, and you're gonna say like drop now. And with airplanes, you're also gonna be like they're gonna have to do passes on you, and you're gonna have to tell them, yes, I was right there, or a little bit more this way. Also, they need to communicate with ground crews because water's really heavy, and you can get really injured if they drop on you. You don't want to be the person that's covered in smelly red retardant at the end of the day. It's really embarrassing. Like, does not smell good. So yeah, you're in constant communication with the helicopters and airplanes. Yeah. Anything else? Cool. Well, if anyone has any other questions at some point, let me know. Thanks again for listening. Really appreciate it.
All right, well, I think we have pizza outside. Ashley brought pizza, so if people want to make their way that way. If you have any more questions for Tyler, he'll be around. If your name is Alexander, you're here to talk to me at some point.